When I tell you that I still remember the exact tone of my father's voice, you need to believe me. It wasn't loud. It wasn't even cruel in the obvious way. It was calm, certain, and final. The kind of voice that made you realize arguing back was pointless. We were all sitting around the long mahogany table in the living room, the same one where we had celebrated birthdays, Thanksgivings, even Christmas dinners. But that day, instead of laughter or stories, there was silence thick enough to choke on. Then my father broke it. He leaned back, folded his arms, and with a half smile that carried no warmth, said the words that shattered me. "Everything goes to your brother." I thought maybe I misheard him. I wanted to believe I had. But my brother, seated at his right hand like some prince awaiting his coronation, leaned back in his chair, smirked, and shot me that look. The one that said, "Of course, this was always mine, and you knew it." He didn't even bother to hide it. My mother shifted uncomfortably, her eyes darting toward me for just a second before fixing themselves on her clasped hands, as if she didn't dare say anything. Nobody else spoke. Just me, staring, waiting for someone to correct the words, to laugh and say it was a bad joke. But there was no laughter, no correction, just the echo of my father's statement bouncing in my skull, making me dizzy. Everything? Everything. The house, the business, the savings, the land. My father said it as if it were natural law, as if it made sense, as if I, his child too, didn't even factor into the equation. I clenched my fists under the table, nails digging into my palms until I thought I'd break the skin. My throat was burning, but I refused to let a single tear fall. If he wanted me to crumble right there, if my brother was waiting to see me beg, they would both be disappointed. I swallowed the scream building inside me and forced myself to sit perfectly still, perfectly quiet. But inside, I was raging. My thoughts came like rapid-fire bullets. How? Why? What did I do wrong? After everything I gave, after everything I sacrificed, after being there when they needed me most, why am I being treated like I don't exist? I wish I could tell you I spoke up then and there, that I stood up and challenged him. But I didn't. Not yet. Because the truth is, I was stunned into silence. All I could think about was how unfair it was. How cruel. How it felt like my whole life had just been erased with one single sentence. And though I didn't know it at that exact moment, that sentence, those 5 words, would change everything. Because what my father didn't realize, what my brother was too arrogant to notice, was that the story wasn't over. Not even close. The day the attorney finally spoke, the tables would turn in ways they could never have imagined. Before I take you to that day in the attorney's office, the day my life took a dramatic turn, I need to tell you who I am and how we got there. My name is Claire, I'm 31 years old, and I grew up in a family that believed appearances meant everything. My father was a businessman who built his company from scratch. People admired him in town. He was known as the man who provided jobs, who showed up at charity events with oversized checks, who gave grand speeches about family values. But inside our home, those values were very selective. I was the eldest child, which meant responsibility fell on me early. I wasn't the golden one. No, that title belonged to my younger brother, Daniel. From the moment he was born, my parents doted on him like he was some miracle gift. Don't get me wrong, I loved him as a kid. I played with him, helped him with homework, and even defended him when bullies picked on him in middle school. But as the years passed, I began to notice the double standard. When Daniel got bad grades, my parents said he was just distracted. When I got a B instead of an A, my father lectured me about discipline for an hour. When Daniel broke curfew, it was, boys will be boys. If I was late by 10 minutes, I was grounded for a week. You'd think I would have grown used to it, but favoritism doesn't hurt less over time. It cuts deeper. Especially when you try so hard to earn the approval that never comes. I graduated college with honors, got my master's degree, and worked countless hours to help in my father's company. I handled finances, coordinated staff, and even took late-night calls when suppliers dropped out. Daniel? He coasted. He partied through college, burned through money, and somehow my father always bailed him out. He'll grow into it, he used to say. One day he'll be ready to take over. That was the part that stung the most, take over. Because while I was practically running half the operations, everyone knew my father's plan. Daniel would inherit it all. And me? I was just there. A placeholder. Useful, dependable, invisible. My mom sometimes whispered to me that she admired my strength, but she never dared stand against my father's decisions. And so, the imbalance grew. The business wasn't just numbers and assets. It was years of my blood, sweat, and sacrifice. Every late night, every spreadsheet, every deal closed. I poured myself into it because I thought, maybe, just maybe, one day he'd see me. One day he'd say, "This belongs to you." But that day never came. Instead, what came was that dinner. That chilling moment when my father announced that everything goes to your brother. It wasn't just about money. It was about erasing me completely, as though my efforts were worthless, as though I had never mattered. That night I realized something. My family wasn't built on love and fairness. It was built on favoritism, lies, and control. But here's what none of them knew. Life has a way of flying. Lapping the script, and the very attorney they trusted to seal my erasure would be the one to open the door for my revenge. The day of the attorneys' meeting felt like walking into a storm I had no umbrella for. My father had called us all together, saying it was time to make things official. The official part, of course, being the will. My stomach turned in knots as I drove to the law office, but I forced myself to keep a steady face. If they wanted me weak, they weren't going to get it. Still, I couldn't shake the memory of that dinner, of my father's words echoing like a curse. Everything goes to your brother. The attorney's office was quiet, polished, lined with shelves of leather-bound books. A heavy oak desk stood in the middle, and behind it sat Mr. Thompson, our family lawyer for as long as I could remember. He was an older man, silver hair, glasses low on his nose, and a face that rarely revealed anything. My father trusted him completely. That made me nervous, but also curious. If everything was so simple, why were we all here? My father walked in first, chest puffed, as though this were some kind of coronation ceremony. Daniel followed right behind, smug as ever, hands shoved in his pockets like he owned the place already. My mother trailed in last, her face pale, her lips pressed tight as though she wanted to vanish into the wall. And me? I walked in with my chin high, even though my heart pounded so hard I thought they might hear it. We sat down, the silence almost unbearable. Mr. Thompson cleared his throat, shuffled some papers, and said, "Thank you all for coming. Today we'll review the contents of the will, as your father has outlined." My breath caught. This was it. The moment where my erasure would be written in ink. My father leaned back, arms folded, watching me. He didn't say anything, but his eyes did. "Don't fight this. Accept it." Daniel smirked, drumming his fingers on the armrest. I wanted to scream at both of them, but I stayed silent, letting Mr. Thompson continue. He began reading, the usual legal jargon rolling out like cold machinery. "To my beloved wife, to my son, Daniel." Each line was another nail in the coffin of my existence. My stomach twisted tighter. And then, when I thought I couldn't take another word, he paused. A long, deliberate pause. My father's brow furrowed slightly. Daniel leaned forward, and I felt my pulse hammer against my ears. Mr. Thompson looked up over his glasses, his voice calm but firm. "However, there are stipulations in this will that must be honored before any transfer of assets occurs." The room froze. My father shifted in his seat, clearly irritated. Daniel scoffed. "Stipulations? What stipulations? Dad already said everything's mine." That was when something shifted inside me, a spark of hope I hadn't felt in years. I sat up straighter, watching Mr. Thompson carefully. The way he held himself, the deliberate calm in his voice, it told me he was about to say something neither my father nor Daniel expected. "Mr. Jameson," he said, addressing my father formally, "what you've outlined is only part of the process. There are legal protections and prior documents that must be reviewed." The air thickened. My father's jaw clenched. Daniel muttered under his breath, clearly annoyed. And me? I felt the tiniest flicker of fire in my chest. Because maybe, just maybe, this story wasn't going to play out the way they thought it would. Little did they know that meeting wasn't the end. It was the beginning of a shift so dramatic it would tear the smugness right off my brother's face. The moment Mr. Thompson mentioned stipulations, my father's entire demeanor shifted. His easy confidence cracked just slightly, but enough for me to see it. He leaned forward, his voice sharp, commanding, "What stipulations? We've already discussed everything. My son inherits it all. That's final." The lawyer didn't flinch. He adjusted his glasses, shuffled the papers slowly, and said in that maddeningly calm voice, "With all due respect, sir, wills are not simply declarations. They are bound by state law, by previous agreements, and by documentation already filed. I cannot read this as though nothing else exists." Daniel let out a laugh. Too loud, too arrogant. "Come on, this is ridiculous. My dad built this empire. He can give it to me if he wants. Isn't that right, Dad?" He leaned back in his chair, smirk widening as though the lawyer was some kind of obstacle to be bulldozed. But Mr. Thompson's eyes flicked to me. Just for a second. And in that second, I felt something shift. Like he knew. Like he'd seen me all those years running the operations, putting in the hours while my brother coasted. My pulse quickened. My father's voice boomed, cutting through the tension. "I don't care about stipulations. Claire understands this. She has her own life. Daniel is the future. I've already made my decision." He turned to me then, eyes hard, voice loaded with finality. "Don't you, Claire?" The weight of the room landed on my shoulders. All eyes on me. My mother looked terrified, silently pleading with her eyes for me not to stir the storm. Daniel smirked, clearly waiting for me to nod and disappear into silence like I always did. My father's stare was suffocating. For years I had given in to it. For years I had accepted being second place. But this time, I couldn't. I swallowed hard, my voice steady though my hands trembled beneath the table. "No," I said softly but firmly. "I don't understand it. Not anymore." The silence after those words was deafening. My father's face darkened, like a storm cloud rolling in. Daniel rolled his eyes and muttered, "Here we go." But Mr. Thompson simply nodded, as though my voice mattered. He continued, "As I was saying, the will cannot be finalized without Revim, viewing the trusts and company shares previously signed. There are documents your father may have overlooked. Documents that were legally binding before this current draft." My heart slammed in my chest. Documents? What documents? I glanced at my father, and for the first time, I saw something in his expression I had never seen before. Uncertainty. He shifted uncomfortably, barked, "That was years ago. Those don't matter anymore." But Mr. Thompson shook his head. "On the contrary, they do. Contracts and trusts remain valid until properly dissolved, which to my knowledge they weren't. And until they are addressed, nothing moves forward." Daniel leaned forward, his smirk faltering. "Wait, what are you saying? That she gets something?" He gestured toward me like I was an intruder in my own family. My fist tightened under the table, but before I could speak, Mr. Thompson answered for me. "I'm saying this isn't as simple as passing everything to you. Claire has legal rights here, and they cannot be ignored." The room erupted. My father slammed his hand on the table. Daniel shouted, "This is insane!" My mother covered her mouth with her hands. And me? For the first time in my life, I didn't feel small. I felt seen. Because in that moment, the unshakable truth was laid bare. My father's control wasn't absolute, and my brother's smug inheritance wasn't guaranteed. The shouting quieted only because Mr. Thompson raised his hand, his calmness a sharp contrast to the storm raging around the table. "Please," he said firmly, "this office is not a place for arguments. We are here to read facts, and the facts are in these documents." He reached into a leather folder and pulled out a stack of papers. My eyes locked on them. They looked old, yellowed at the edges, but neatly preserved. He slid the top page forward and adjusted his glasses. "Years ago," he began, "when Mr. Jameson expanded the company, he signed a set of trust agreements to protect his assets in case of unforeseen circumstances. These trusts legally included both children as beneficiaries." Daniel immediately jumped in. "That can't be right! Dad said it's all mine!" But Mr. Thompson didn't flinch. Whether he said it or not doesn't change the legality. Unless these trusts were dissolved, and I have no record of that, they are binding, which means... He looked directly at me now, his voice steady. Claire has equal ownership rights. The words hit me like a thunderclap. For a second, I couldn't breathe. Equal ownership rights? I blinked, gripping the arms of my chair as if I needed to hold on to something solid. My father's face went pale, then red with rage. "This is nonsense," he snapped. "I created those trusts as a temporary safeguard. They were never meant to stand." But Mr. Thompson's calm voice cut through again. "Intentions don't override the law. The trusts stand until legally revoked, which, as I said, never happened. I have the signed originals here." He laid the documents on the desk for all of us to see. My name was right there, inked beside Daniel's. Proof that, at least once in my father's life, I had mattered enough to be written into the foundation of everything he built. Daniel shoved his chair back, face twisted in disbelief. "This has to be a mistake. Dad, tell him to fix it. You can fix it, right?" For the first time, my father didn't look powerful. He looked trapped. His jaw tightened, his fists clenched, but he couldn't meet my eyes. And in that moment, I realized something profound. He had known about this all along. He had tried to bury it, hoping no one would ever dig it back up. I felt heat rising in my chest. Anger, vindication, and something sharper. "So all these years," I said slowly, "you told me none of this was mine, when you knew it was. You let me break my back for this family, for this business, and still told me I had nothing. Why?" My voice cracked, but I didn't care. Why pretend I was invisible when you knew the truth? The silence was suffocating. My father opened his mouth, then shut it again. Daniel muttered curses under his breath, furious but powerless. My mother's eyes glistened with tears she didn't dare let fall. Mr. Thompson cleared his throat. "To be clear, the company, the properties, and the accounts are equally divided between Claire and Daniel. That is what the law recognizes. Any attempt to ignore or bypass that could result in litigation." And just like that, the entire narrative flipped. I wasn't the forgotten child anymore. I wasn't the invisible placeholder. I was a rightful heir, equal to the brother who had always been crowned above me. But the reveal didn't end there, because hidden inside those trusts was another clause, one my father had conveniently hoped no one would ever see. And when Mr. Thompson read it aloud, the room would never be the same again. Mr. Thompson flipped to the next page, his finger tracing a paragraph as though he wanted to choose his words carefully. Then he looked up, his expression sharper now. "There is one more clause," he said. "This may come as unexpected." The room tensed. Daniel leaned forward, impatient. My father's jaw twitched. I sat frozen, my heart thundering in my chest. Mr. Thompson began to read. "In the event that both beneficiaries contribute unequally to the company's growth, the shares of the business shall be adjusted proportionally to reflect actual contributions, as documented through records, performance, and financial audits." The silence that followed was suffocating. My father's face drained of color. Daniel's smirk collapsed completely. And me, I could barely process the words. Adjusted proportionally? That meant... Mr. Thompson looked directly at me. "Claire, according to the company's own records, you have been managing operations, handling contracts, and generating profit for years. Daniel, on the other hand, has minimal documented involvement. Based on these records, the business majority would shift under Claire's ownership." "I swear you could We heard a pin drop. Daniel shot to his feet, his voice breaking with panic. "That's impossible. I'm the heir. Dad promised." He turned to our father, desperation in his voice now. "Fix this! You can't let her take it from me!" My father looked stricken, gripping the arms of his chair so tightly his knuckles whitened. For once, the great, powerful man had no control. He opened his mouth, but the only words that came out were weak, trembling. This wasn't supposed to happen." I rose slowly, my legs trembling, but my voice steady. Wasn't supposed to happen, or wasn't supposed to be discovered? My gaze cut into him, years of bottled pain spilling out in every syllable. "You spent my entire life telling me I was nothing. You knew I was working harder, doing more, keeping everything afloat, and you still tried to erase me. You wanted me to believe I didn't matter so Daniel could walk away with everything. Daniel glared at me, fists clenched, face red with rage. You don't deserve it. You've always been second best, and you always will be. But his words sounded hollow now, pathetic against the weight of the truth. I stepped closer, my voice low but powerful. Second best? The documents don't lie, Daniel. You partied while I worked. You spent while I saved. You slept while I kept the company alive. And now the truth is finally in writing. No more shadows, no more invisibility. I earned this. My mother finally spoke then, her voice trembling. Claire. Her eyes were wet, her hands clutching each other tightly. For the first time, she didn't look away. She looked right at me, as though seeing me clearly for the first time. But my father slammed a fist on the table, his pride crumbling into desperation. This will destroy the family, he barked. I shook my head, my voice breaking but strong. No. This family destroyed itself the moment you chose favoritism or fairness. Silence over truth. Daniel's rage turned into something smaller. Fear. He collapsed back into his chair, muttering, This isn't over. But the fight had already left him. The smugness was gone. And in that moment, I realized my revenge wasn't about taking anything. It was about finally standing in the light, finally being acknowledged. For once, the truth was louder than the lies. After the confrontation, the air in the attorney's office felt different. Heavy, yes, but also lighter. For years I had carried the weight of silence, of invisibility, of pretending I was okay with being treated like a shadow in my own family. But now, the truth was out. On paper. Unchangeable. Mr. Thompson gathered the documents calmly, as if he hadn't just detonated a bomb that shattered decades of my father's narrative. These matters will require further processing, he said, his tone steady. But the outcome is clear. The company cannot transfer entirely to Daniel. The shares will be legally adjusted, and Claire will have majority control. Daniel cursed under his breath, slumping in his chair like a dethroned prince. My father sat stiff, staring at nothing, his pride bruised so badly it looked like he'd aged 10 years in that moment. My mother dabbed at her eyes with a tissue, her quiet sobs the only sound for a while. I stood, my legs steady now, my voice firm. I'll be meeting with you, Mr. Thompson, to make sure this process is followed through correctly. He nodded, offering me a look of quiet respect. I turned to face my father then, the man who raised me, who taught me discipline but never gave me love, who demanded perfection but never offered praise. I thought I would feel triumph seeing him brought low, but instead, all I felt was clarity. You could have been proud of me, I said softly. You could have built something bigger, something that included both of us. But you chose to divide us, and you chose to pretend I didn't matter. That was your decision, not mine. His lips parted, but no words came out. Maybe he wanted to defend himself. Maybe he wanted to apologize. But pride is a powerful cage, and he stayed silent. I didn't wait for his answer. I didn't need it anymore. For the first time in my life, I knew where I stood. I walked out of that office with my head high, leaving behind the weight of being second best. The weeks that followed were difficult. Meetings, paperwork, phone calls. But every signature, every finalized adjustment felt like reclaiming a piece of myself that had been stolen long ago. When the final documents arrived, declaring me majority owner of the company I had poured my life into, I sat alone in my apartment and let myself cry. Not out of sadness, but out of relief. Out of justice. Daniel tried to fight it, of course. He threw tantrums, threatened lawsuits, even begged my father to find a loophole. But there were no loopholes left. The law was clear. The records were undeniable. My father's influence could no longer protect him. And eventually, he had to accept that reality. As for me, I didn't just gain control of the company. I gained control of my own story. No longer the invisible daughter. No longer the placeholder. I was the one steering my future. And that, more than the money, more than the business, was the real victory. If you've stayed with me through this story, thank you. Maybe you've been overlooked in your own life. Maybe someone tried to erase your worth, too. Let me tell you, truth has a way of coming out. Don't let anyone convince you you're less than what you are. And if this story resonated with you, Please take a moment to subscribe, like, and share this video. Your support means more than you know, and it helps me bring more stories like this to light. Until next time, remember, sometimes the best revenge is simply owning the life they said you couldn't.